Welcome to the latest episode of WSP's Anticipate podcast, where we invite experts and thought leaders to share unique perspectives on future trends, hot topics, and anticipate future solutions to complex problems. I'm your host, Mohamed Nazier, the Managing Director for the Transport and Infrastructure business of WSP in the Middle East. Technological innovations are set to revolutionize and humanize our world and industries, making our life more seamless, efficient, and economical. Moreover, real-world applications of emergent technologies such as artificial intelligence are beginning to illustrate how digital innovation can improve the safety and efficiency of infrastructure networks and the future mobility mix. In this episode, we will be exploring whether or not technology can humanize the future mobility ecosystem. It's an honor to be joined today by Gabi Zijderveld, Chief Marketing Officer at Affectiva. Gabi, thanks and welcome again, and thanks for joining us for this podcast. Digital transformation is becoming a thing around the world. I know in your industry it's been around for a long time. In the construction industry, it's been around for some time, but not as long as it has been in other sectors. In the infrastructure space and in the livable communities that we design, construct, and maintain over long numbers of years, artificial intelligence and machine learning, other aspects of digital will play a big role in how we shape the future for future generations to come. Your view on this in terms of trends, what do you think the trends are now and how they will evolve, in time?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of thoughts, and maybe I'll start with construction, and then I'll broaden it a bit also to kind of the space that we at Affectiva operate in. When you mentioned that the construction industry specifically is perhaps a bit behind in digital transformation, I do believe that there's tremendous opportunities there with machine learning and deep learning approaches and AI. And there's some trends, I think, that are popping out. I think there's amazing opportunities around AI process automation. And this would touch many, many different areas, basically optimizing the way that projects are being planned, a much more efficient use of, I'm sure, massive amounts of data that are being generated in that industry. Basically also allowing automation of very manual and tedious labor-intensive tasks that people need to do, and have machine learning approaches to automate and optimize those, allowing then for the human to focus more on, as we hear so often, the more creative tasks, the things that require more interpersonal interactions. So basically freeing human skill to focus in areas where humans are uniquely equipped to add value, if you will. So I think AI process automation is super interesting. Also, and we at Affectiva, we use computer vision as well. I think computer vision combined with machine learning is super interesting also in the construction industry. For example, when you consider issues such as construction site safety, if you can use computer vision to identify proactively issues that could be a safety concern. For example, we have workers that are doing work with electricity, but there is water nearby that's not being noticed. That could be a dangerous situation. It could also be maybe violations of workplace requirements where maybe someone is smoking on a site where they absolutely should not be smoking. So there's some really interesting applications there. So, gosh, I could go on forever, but I think in the construction industry, definitely those are two areas and two trends that we're seeing that could be massively interesting. If we broaden it a bit to, I guess, AI in general, and especially coming at this with our own domain expertise, I also think AI-powered chatbots are advancing rapidly, a massively interesting space where, for example, if you just think of urban settings or customer service settings in work environments where you could provide consumers much faster and easier access to information by using chatbots, could be, from a consumer perspective, really interesting. But then if you think of this from the perspective of the service provider, imagine, for example, urban settings where you have a city that's delivering services to its constituents. If they could use AI-powered chatbots to automate this, the amount of savings that can be achieved are quite significant. And many cities and governments struggle with their budgets. So I think this could then free up opportunities to deploy.
I think that's very interesting, actually. Obviously, the construction phase is one phase where a lot of applications can be applied. And I think actually it's more advanced than the operations phase. So the operations of infrastructure, including, the customer experience, and in this case, the public are the customers, right? Because they're the ones using these utilities. And then also maybe, as you mentioned, areas of development and digitization where the maintenance, and this is a problem that all governments have, what to maintain first and how much data that can they get around improvements. And some of it can be through feedback from the customers, which are the end users on the streets and on the urban settings that we see. Can you maybe tell us more about the chat pods and where do you envisage their use in such area?
I especially think the trend is accelerating where there is interactions between, as I mentioned a bit earlier, the service providers and consumers. And when you think about urban and infrastructure settings, that spans a number of different areas, right? So again, I gave the example of the cities where they provide services to the constituents, and right now it's often you have to call a phone number and then you wait online forever, and then if you're lucky you get someone on the phone, but usually you get voicemail. And I do know that in many Middle Eastern countries it's way more advanced than in the US, but that's basically the world we live in here. If you can automate that and have intelligent, so AI-powered chatbots that using, for example, natural language processing as a methodology to understand what someone is saying and then based on massive amounts of data that system has been trained with, give the right answer, it is a much more efficient, cost-effective, and better experience for every single person involved that's tapping into that service. It also is a huge cost saving for anyone that's basically tasked with providing these type of services. Now, if you think, I'm tying it back to, for example, the construction areas and operational settings, where I can imagine that there is also massive amounts of information that people working on these projects need to access at any given moment. And of course, we can all imagine the old days where there were literally printed out manuals and instruction guides and books that had to be tapped into, or people that had to be called to get their expertise. All of that is being automated. There's massive amounts of data. Actually, just a very quick sidebar. Many years ago, I worked for MRO Software, who had a software platform that was very much focused on maintenance and repair and management of operational assets. And the amount of data that even in those days before machine learning was deployed was generated was just astonishing. And getting quick and easy access to that data was challenging. Now, if you can use machine learning and AI to automate that, to add a layer of intelligence that these systems can offer up the right information to the right person at the right time, will create amazing efficiencies. So I think also in the operational areas.
I believe that we maybe need a full other session on, data and connectivity and the amount of, in the infrastructure and livable space. And with multiple providers of both data push and pull, we actually have assets that talk, in digital. So SCADA systems that read off pipeline, pressures, asphalt leveling and level of service criteria that, transponds to machines. I think we could probably do another full session just on how, because I can't imagine what would be done with all of this data, what could be done with all of this data when mixed with artificial intelligence and learning as we go. But in your view, what would collect or bring all of this together is what astonishes me. I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
What today I believe is extremely challenging, right? And Mohamed, you absolutely pointed to the main opportunity here. There's massive amounts of data that are being generated through these systems, through these business processes, through all these operational projects. But I think the challenge today is that most of that is generated from all these disparate systems, right? You have all these different platforms, software that are generating all this data. And also there's no common language, if you will, that's tying these all together. So you have all this massive unstructured data, and trying to bring that together so you can get insight into that is extremely challenging when they're generated in different formats, if you will, through different platforms. So I think it's almost data consolidation and data aggregation is even a huge challenge there. The data warehousing is not trivial either. And when those very foundational problems get solved, then you have the opportunity, okay, now I have this well-organized, well-integrated data set that I can then let my machine learning algorithms loose on and provide intelligence.
With enough places, people, companies like Affectiva and WSP and people continuing to talk, and with the will, there will be breakthroughs in these areas, because urbanization will not stop. It's something that will continue to happen. Another innovation that Affectiva has worked on and is very relevant to our discussion today, the automative artificial intelligence offering that you at Affectiva have rolled out. Can you tell us more about it and how this can be maybe of relevance to what we do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll take just a minute or two to explain how we actually got to the automotive industry, because that was an interesting evolution for us as a company as well. So as an organization, Affectiva was founded 12 years ago when our co-founder spun the organization out of MIT Media Lab. And in the early days, the company was very much focused on emotion recognition. So basically, our software uses machine learning, computer vision, and lots of data to analyze humans. We especially analyze the human face. We also have some capabilities to analyze the human voice. But if you do that in a certain context, you can get really interesting insights. You can start understanding people's reactions, people's facial expressions. And in the context, you can then infer emotions as well. Very simplistic things such as, someone is looking at a video ad, it's humorous, people are smiling, you now know that this is resonating with your target audience. So this started evolving. And again, we could probably spend a whole hour on this. There's many, many different applications for this type of technology. We started in the early days in this media analytics space, where we basically work with the big brands of the world to understand how their target audiences are responding to content such as ads or TV programming or movies. But when you start thinking about gaming, retail, healthcare, education, so many different applications. But as a small company, as a startup in the AI space, of course, you have to focus. And it was a number of years ago that we started seeing interest from the big car manufacturers. They were approaching us and said, okay, this artificial emotional intelligence, this emotion AI that you're building, can we actually use that in cars as well to understand what's going on with people? And yes, absolutely. It was even in the early days when this was still research at MIT Media Lab that there was a strong appreciation that in the far future this would be valuable in automotive. But suddenly this far future was here today. And yeah, it was interesting. We started noticing a significant increase in inbound interest in this technology. So can emotion AI be used in cars? Yes, absolutely. And then for many of these car manufacturers, the logical next question was, so when you analyze humans in a car, can you also understand what's going on with the driver? Can you detect things such as drowsiness and distraction? And at the time, we had not yet built machine learning classifiers, or if you will, algorithms that could detect those things. But we had the foundational technology that would allow us to do that. So we did a lot of research, and we did our own due diligence to assess whether or not this would be the right time to enter this market. And it was about 4 years ago that we decided to go after the automotive space in full force. So that's one of our large growth markets today. And use cases are really centered around two main things. First and foremost, it's about vehicle safety. To reduce accidents on the road caused by poor driving, distraction, drowsiness. The majority of accidents and road fatalities are caused by distracted and drowsy drivers. So if our technology can help address that problem, we're basically saving lives on a daily basis. So safety is the main area of focus. But when you start deploying cameras in vehicles, to understand what's going on with the driver, you can also see the rest of the car if you place the camera in the right position. And with that information, you can get really valuable insights as to what's happening in the environment. Are the backseat passengers enjoying this? Is there a child seat? Is there potentially a child left behind? In a rideshare or autonomous vehicle, are there objects that are forgotten and left behind by the clients? So many, many different use cases, and we call this in-cabin sensing or interior sensing, and it's a new area in automotive powered by machine learning and computer vision that's accelerating quite rapidly.
When we started our conversation, you mentioned something around how people can evolve away from some of the tedious tasks that they do, right, and leave it to machines to do, and then they can be more creative, more alert in this case, so less accidents. Do you see this technology or this offering being extended into public transportation and other aspects of humanizing the public transportation experience for people? And I know for some of the commuters before the COVID days, that was very the tube in London, or our rides into New York in the morning, early mornings, and back in the rush hour. So do you see this offering being extended into this space, and what would it be if it does?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely applications there. And interestingly enough, some of the cities in the Middle East are actually actively looking at this. So there's some number of government initiatives and early stage conversations that we've had. It first and foremost comes down, I think, to two main areas where this technology would be applied. It's on the one hand still around safety, but also around the customer experience, which is key in public transport and in many urban settings is still problematic. I can talk about Boston. Public transport is not always great here, right? And there's more. It also, of course, has to do with aging infrastructure and the challenges of updating that at a scale that it's needed. But if you can basically understand what's going on with your customer, with people that are taking public transport, and based on their experience, their reaction, their engagement with the environment, if that gives you insight to optimize that, to improve the experience, suddenly you're talking about a whole different level of customer service that will increase ridership, will increase customer satisfaction. So that I think is one area. I do think, and this is quite interesting and maybe not even that far off, the promise of autonomy or autonomous vehicles. And then the self-driving car where we hop in our car in the morning and it's going to drive us to work. I don't even know if we're going to see that in our lifetime. But autonomous shuttles, maybe in geo-fenced areas or dedicated lanes, that exists already today. There's large campuses, either industrial campuses or academic campuses. There's certainly in Asia and the Middle East, there's very new infrastructure being built with dedicated lanes on highways where these autonomous shuttles can drive. And our type of technology is going to empower a whole array of different use cases there. Again, think about safety as a primary focus area. If You no longer have a lot of staff working in these autonomous shuttles. And the idea is, of course, you wouldn't have a lot of staff working there because it's more cost effective to not have people servicing those systems. Then you need to know, are your passengers safe? Is there a passenger who's having a medical event? God forbid someone has a heart attack. What is going to happen?
Humanizing that experience actually is maybe what we're talking about here, right? Humanizing an automated service.
Yeah, and I love how you're summarizing that. That's exactly what it is. It's humanizing an automated service. And I think actually that is a challenge we see with many technologies and many AI systems today, right? And this is ultimately what got our company started, is that we're surrounded by all these technologies, these really advanced systems, and they have great cognitive analytic capabilities. But ultimately, these systems are all designed to help humans, to provide better service to humans, but they have very little understanding of the human. They don't really engage with humans in a way that is empathetic, in a way that is perceptive. If a system would know that I, as a user, am having a really bad experience, am not enjoying it, or I'm getting frustrated, or I'm not getting the information that I need, if that system could take that insight about me and then humanize that experience, it's going to be way more productive, effective, and persuasive.
Generations are changing. Baby boomers are different to generation X to Z to whatever we get to, right? So, and their experience growing up with machines and iPads. So my 3 years old now plays with their iPad, very savvy with it. I remember my 3 years old days vaguely, but I don't think I was any way near to any digital device until I was a teenager. So, so I think the generational needs in communities as we grow into the digital era more and more will be completely different. I don't know if you agree, but I think their whole perception and their whole expectation of what the service provided should be will be different. I think maybe a lot of this humanization will help support these upcoming generations in a different way that doesn't take them away completely from being human, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's such an interesting notion, right? Because these younger generations, right? They're digitally native, as you were describing with your 3-year-old child. They grow up surrounded by technology and are very accustomed from a very early age interacting with technology. What's also a super interesting notion, I think, here is that for these digital natives, if you will, they also grew up in a world where information is at their fingertips. My daughter gets frustrated when Amazon Prime says it's going to take more than 3 days to deliver something. And I have to remind her that I grew up in an era where you had a paper catalog and you picked out an item and you were happy if it arrived 2 months later, right? so so this is this but we live in a world now where there's instant gratification, immediate access to information, uh, that is unheard of, right? And I still think, bringing this also maybe back to our conversation at the beginning, right, with an industry such as construction that is catching up, um, we're not, as a society, we're not there yet, right? We're not there yet to be able to address that and in all the settings and all the contexts give people the right information at the right time there and then. And I do think when we think about the smart city, the city of the future, about mobility experiences, those same notions are applying there, right? Like consumer expectations of stellar service exactly when I want it, personalized to me in a way that serves me, is ultimately where we're going as a society. And you can only deliver on that if you humanize the technology systems that are in service of that. So I couldn't agree with you more.
And it's driving our our thinking on the workforce as well. How do you see the future of that whole experience of of recruitment, retention, rewards? Do you see this ever changing? Do you see humanizing some of the digital technology to facilitate this also being part of the future?
We know that humans are biased. Of course we are. We all have our own perceptions of other people. We have our own experiences that inform how we decide and on hiring, on working with others. And what's interesting here is that research has also shown that people are biased in their hiring. They basically like to hire people that look like them, that are like them. That in itself is a huge challenge, right? Because I'm a firm believer that you only really truly get to innovation and creativity if you have a diverse workforce. And if I'm building a team and I hire people that look like me, that's not good, I think. So the question is, how with these advanced technologies, how with machine learning, for example, can we improve these systems? I think, for example, in the area of hiring, there's tremendous opportunities because if we can design these systems well, we can design them in a way that could mitigate for the human bias. But I emphasize we need to design these systems well. And that actually ties into another major trend in AI, which is the societal demands for ethical AI. Right? We've seen so many failings of AI systems, especially when you think about technology like facial recognition that should recognize all kinds of people accurately, but it doesn't, especially not people with darker skin tones, and especially not if they're female. And that is purely an issue of poor R&D design. It's probably a lack of diversity on the teams that build these systems. It's a lack of consideration around who these technologies should really serve, right? And that's also, this whole ethics is hugely important in humanizing technology, right? Because building human-centric AI, you need to design it in a way that serves all these humans that these systems are interacting with. It's issues of poor data collection, poor machine learning training and modeling and testing. So there's major issues, I think, in AI around the ethics of it all. And as a company, and our CEO Rana Al Kayoubi and myself have been quite vocal about this also publicly. As a company building human-centric AI, ethics has to be at the forefront of everything we do. Ethics of how we develop the technology, but also ethics around how you deploy it so that you can truly humanize the experience and make sure that it works equitably and fairly for all people involved. And I think that's also, why the area of hiring, for example, is quite interesting, because if AI is designed and deployed the right way, and also in a way that it's mindful of data privacy and it's not invasive and not turning into surveillance of people without their knowledge. But if hiring uses AI the right way, I think it could really make a significant difference in how organizations grow and scale. But we're not quite there yet. I think the AI industry has more work to do, for sure.
As you work with new graduates and people come out of school and generations, like we said, that are used to more imminent, type information, what do you think their perception of or expectation of a good place to work would be? Would it be similar to what we feel today, or would it be maybe a completely different experience that would attract them to a workplace?
Yeah, that's it. I love that question, actually. That's a really great question. I think it's probably different. I do know for a fact that the younger generations are demanding much more flexibility flexibility in hours, flexibility on how and where and when they choose to work. And one thing that's been interesting in this past year during the global pandemic is that I think all these notions of what work, pleasant work environments are has been completely disrupted, right? Because prior to the pandemic, we knew that the younger generations demanded this flexibility, right? And many of them reside in urban settings and they don't want to commute out to an office park way out in the suburbs. They don't even want to own a car, right? They just want to be able to, whatever, use their scooter, as one of my colleagues does, or ride sharing to get to the office. And they don't even want to go to the office every day. They want to be able to maybe travel and work when it's convenient to them. Now, granted, this is not doable in every single industry, right? Of course, there's industries where people need to be on site or people need to be in an office building. But for example, the industry that I work in, technology, as long as I have internet connectivity and a laptop, I'm good to go. And it doesn't matter where I am. And this has been interesting during this pandemic. I had someone on my team, now her husband, who usually had to go into a law firm, now her husband was working from home, and home could also be out in Montana. Why not? So for 2 months, they rented a house in Montana and worked remote. And I thought it was fantastic. And this has offered life opportunities for people that they otherwise could never realize. So the interesting question, I think, is of all this disruption we've seen to how we work and how we balance life and work, this disruption we've seen in this past year, what of that is going to stick? And are we seeing the same dynamics around the world? Or does it matter maybe what country you're in or what industry you're in? But I don't think we'll go back to where we were. I'm actually really curious to hear your opinion on that. What are your thoughts?
I do a lot of thinking, obviously, because we do hire in a very diversified environment in the Middle East from a location wise. I believe, and I could be right, I could be wrong. I'd be very rich if I was very right. But I know the future. I believe a hybrid. So pre-pandemic, especially our industry, a lot of people would be going to offices. We did have a flexible work from home arrangement, but a lot of people would come to the office. It'd be vibe. It'd be busy. A lot of people would go out to site for construction sites, and post-pandemic, people have realized, including both clients and workers and employees, that the remote work is possible, that digital can help. So, for example, inspections that used to happen in person on site ended up happening through a simple video captured by mobile, sent to the inspector, who can then ask for more videos or a more zoomed in picture, and it helped and it worked and actually made them probably more efficient, because and reduced costs. So I believe a hybrid would be most probably the future, a hybrid way of working. Now, how is it designed? That's still to come. How does it also vary by where you are in your career? So early newcomers from out of school probably need more human experience, maybe, to get to know the way, around, more clients, more way of working. More so, I would tend to think a hybrid way of working would be the future of work. Exactly what shape and which ways and which tools will vary probably by industry and by location. Also, governance. One area that will need some more development is governance. Visa restrictions, work, laws around taxation. So, like you mentioned, someone can be working out of Montana, and their work is fully in Boston. Now, again, here in the region, it might vary. So, working in Dubai to do some work in Saudi, or vice versa, or it might require changes in laws, and this might take some time. So, I think once we unfold all of these issues and design a better and more flexible workplace, it will take us into a much more human way of working and reduce commute, reduce long travels. People at different levels can now travel more, travel less for work, and maybe travel more for leisure. So better well-being. So I think maybe also there's hopefully an opportunity for Affectiva in the space of humanizing remote work. I don't know if you're doing anything in that. Maybe that's an area that you're already doing some work on.
This is really interesting. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more that I do think post-pandemic the future of work will be a hybrid one. And I think it will also center around a more humanized experience, right? And also notions of empathetic leadership, I think, have really popped up in the past year. And we talk about that a lot. And I'm sure WSP has as well, but we've internally thought about that a lot, right? Because it's been challenging for every single employee. And you can't compare, right? For who is it more difficult? The single parent who has their daycare closed and now they're stuck at home with 2 toddlers, or the person who lives by themselves and hasn't been able to interact with anyone for a year, right? Like, you can't compare. It's been a challenging situation for everyone. And I think it's made a lot of leaders revisit what leadership should look like, and that we should treat people with empathy and understanding and less judgment, I think, that we were generally prone to. So I'm curious also to see, aside from business process and technology optimization, also in terms of leadership and how we manage teams, what will stick there. But what's been interesting for us, right? So back to the technology we build, and on a bigger scale, we build human perception AI, right? So software that can understand humans in a context. And what has been really interesting, and we think there's a huge opportunity there, but we just haven't been able to take it on because we're a small team and we've been really tied up with client work. It's kind of always the perpetual startup challenge. But the opportunity is, think about these Zoom meetings, these virtual meetings, right? Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, Zoom. In many, many industries, people are now online, 8 hours a day. And when we think about education settings, when we think about these virtual conferences that we've all attended, it is so challenging because you cannot really see all the other people there. You can't read people's body language. Engagement is really challenging. I feel for all these teachers who were stuck teaching online. I see it with my own daughter who's like, I'm not going to turn on the camera. No one does. So there you have these teachers in a classroom of 20 kids virtually, and there's all these little black boxes that they're looking at. Horrible, horrible. But what if, our type of AI, what if that was integrated into these virtual conferencing systems to, again, back to what you also pointed out earlier, to humanize the experience? What if teachers could get a readout, almost a little dashboard, that these students actually are paying attention, that maybe they don't have their camera on because there's not enough bandwidth in the household, but that they are paying attention, that they are engaged, that they are following, that they are laughing at their jokes, or maybe get a notification if someone appears to be confused or has lack of attention, that maybe someone can reach out. Imagine, Mohamed, you're presenting at an industry event, and you have, normally speaking, if you're on stage, you might have a few hundred people in the audience, and you can kind of read the room, right? You might explain something, or you tell a story, and you notice that the audience is engaged, that they're interested, that they're paying attention. Or you crack a joke and people laugh. Now that this is all virtual, no clue. Which makes it really difficult also for people that are out there presenting and communicating. But it's also difficult for the audience, right? Because we like to go to our industry conferences because of a shared experience, right? It's a humanized experience. So ultimately all about fostering human connection. And it's been so challenging. So we do believe that for our type of AI, There is a tremendous opportunity in this space, and we have some ideas of what it would look like. We just haven't been able to execute it. We just don't have the bandwidth.
Hopefully, with more people and more focus on what the future would look like post-pandemic, new ideas, new creations will be out there that we haven't thought of. That's where creativity will kick in. Very, very interesting discussion, Gabi. Very interesting insight from a company and a person who's trying to humanize the digital experience, which I think is essential for the years to come. Before we wrap up, and I like we said before, I think there's a lot more that we can discuss. We probably need focus sessions on some of these elements, and maybe some very good ideas can probably come out of it. So we can discuss this maybe offline. But if you can maybe summarize in your view, from where you sit, what would be an end goal, right, of humanizing technology? What is the vision, right, in your view?
In my view, the vision for humanizing technology is to ultimately improve human-to-machine interaction and the human-to-human interaction when those take place in a digital context. It's about making those interactions more effective, more empathetic, more relevant, more personalized, ultimately making them better. And then when those experiences are deployed in certain areas, such as, for example, automotive, then there's tremendous opportunities to also focus in on safety and ultimately saving lives.
Very well said. Thank you very much, Gabi. And I look forward to more discussions with you. Thank you.
Same here. It was a great conversation. Thank you, Mohamed.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, Gabi. Thanks for your time.